Well, Nikki Haley is warning Republicans that Donald Trump isn't the same man he was in 2016 as she desperately clings on to the race for nomination.
He is not the same person he was in 2016. He is unhinged. He is more diminished than he was.
You endorsed him when he ran again. You were a vocal supporter. You were out on the campaign trail.
I'm the first one to say I voted for him twice. I was proud to serve America in his administration. But you can go back and look in my book. I cite multiple times, and he knows it, when I called him out for things that he was doing that were wrong. Since I got out of the administration, I have called him out multiple times.
All right, for our World News panel tonight, joining me, strategic analyst and co-founder of AusThink, Paul Monk, and the founder and director of Strategic Analysis Australia, Michael Shoebridge. Welcome to you both, gentlemen. Paul, what do you think about Nikki Haley now? She's still hanging in there, presumably in case Trump ends up in jail or something happens to him.
Well, there is that possibility, of course, and I dare say that that's got to be part of her calculation for hanging in there as she is. But the question, of course, is very much about, and I think she's raised this herself, how is the RNC running its campaign, and where Trump is channeling money into his court cases and they appear to be short of money. There's a bit of a mess behind the scenes there. And it'd be lovely to see that clarified. But I think you're right about Haley's sense of the situation. What remains to be seen is if it takes months for any conviction to come through, and then there's got to be a decision as to how, in fact, that affects Trump's candidacy, where exactly does that leave Nikki Haley and the Republican Party?
Look, we're seeing poll after poll showing that Joe Biden is struggling with his approval ratings among Americans. The latest one, a new poll from Gallup, says he's just got a 41% approval ratings. Immigration and the economy, the top two reasons why voters think he's doing a poor job. Michael, surely the Democrats have to give up on Biden if they have any chance of having a candidate who could be competitive against Trump?
Well, I think the big problem is a lot of American voters don't want either of the potential candidates, Donald Trump or Joe Biden. And so it's a race to the bottom. Nikki Haley is electable, polls show, but she's a candidate that, while Trump dominates the Republican Party, is not selectable. So that's the real problem. And it comes from having a 77-year-old Trump and a Biden who'll be 81. Nikki Haley is trying to get people to focus on what Donald Trump is saying, just like all this focus about Biden having all these missteps. But no one's listening. Trump is channeling grievance and anger. People aren't really interested in his words. So in that event, it still looks like a Biden-Trump contest. And the polls show that if that happens, it's really tight.
I think I've always thought Nikki Haley was a very impressive figure, and she does have a lot of support in Australia because of how well she executed herself when she was America's representative to the United Nations. But, you know, you're right, among the Republican Party, Trump just seems to have the majority of voters wrapped up, and we've seen that in the couple of primaries that have happened so far. Look, major news in the US today, 1 person dead, 21 injured, including children, after a mass shooting broke out at the Kansas City Chiefs Super Bowl victory rally. Look, they're currently treating 11 children for injuries following the attack. Paul, this is really yet another senseless shooting in the US.
Yeah, and you know, one has to say, whenever these happen, there tends to be an outcry about gun laws in the United States. And one could certainly approach it from that point of view. But there are actually countries in the world that have just as many guns per capita as the United States, and they don't have all these mass shootings. So I think you really have to look at something other than simply gun ownership or gun laws. You have to look at the social psychology that generates this violence. And the United States, of course, is a complex and in some ways not altogether cohesive society. That's where I'd be looking. So it's lamentable that these things occur. But one also should bear in mind that we get to focus through international media and US reporting on these incidents. we always need to remind ourselves that there are many countries in the world, including most of the countries in the Western Hemisphere, whose homicide rates are far higher than that in the United States. You know, you just go south of the border in Mexico, it's 6 times that of the United States. So we do focus on these incidents inordinately because we get the reporting and because other Western democracies tend to have much lower homicide rates than the United States. But it is a complex equation and it needs, careful thought and somebody, of course, courageous enough to do, dare I say, what John Howard did in this country and step up and say, we do need to reform a few things here.
Yeah, it's extraordinary that still hasn't managed to happen in the US. Mike, I want to ask you about another story. There's this report in the New York Times that United States intelligence is reporting that Russia has apparently advanced on a new space-based nuclear weapon. This is apparently a satellite killer that could, if deployed, destroy military communications, surveillance, even command operations. This seems like kind of something that you'd see in a movie, but apparently this is what Russia's developing.
Well, Sharri, this isn't really a surprise to hear that Russia is developing weapons to destroy American satellites, because American satellites are key to America's strategic and military power and, of course, the globe's economy. There are anti-satellite weapons already. There are anti-satellite satellites on orbit, and the Chinese have many of these systems. So the Russians and the Chinese are focused on taking away America's satellite advantage. But the details of the particular Russian weapon we can't know. Russia's now on a war footing. They're spending 40% of their GDP on military matters, and they've always invested in space, missiles and nuclear technology. So it's not a surprise.
It is certainly terrifying. And when you have journalists conducting soft interviews with him, it's even more worrying. Paul Monk, Michael Shoebridge, thank you both so much for your insights tonight. Really appreciate it.